Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our very first user group session. So today we're going to be talking about the best of the best practices for our authoring console. We know that the authoring console is a very feature-rich product, so we really try to distill down to the core tips and tricks that we thought it would be best to share with all of our users because we do get a lot of questions about the authoring console. And we have here today Chris Millay, our support manager, and Justin Borger, our technical manager, who will be hosting the session. And myself as well. My name is Lon, and I'm the customer success manager here at Subvision. The agenda today, first off, we already did a really quick introduction, and then I'm going to explain how this session will work. Essentially, what happens is that this session will be broken down into two parts. The first part will be Justin and Chris going over the best practices for the authoring console. And then the second part will be an open discussion with our users today who are attending this session to go over any questions and any tips that they may have and that they would like to share. And then, we'll go from there. With that said, Justin and Chris, please feel free to take it away from here.
Thank you very much, Lon.
Thank you.
Just a very warm welcome to everyone on the webinar. This is the first time we're trying this, so we're keeping this a bit open format. You guys have an ability to join in whenever you'd like. We've got questions open, and we've got the raise your hand ability. That you guys can join in at any stage. We're going to be keeping this very light and very generalized. So some of you who are looking for a little bit more of a deeper dive, feel free to reach out to us and we can specifically talk to you about that when you're ready. We are doing some events after this as well, when we're planning on doing this as a regular series. So we're also looking for topics that you guys would like to have. So feel free to share those with us and we can arrange our next sessions accordingly. So let's dive into it. So the first one we thought we'd look at a highly talked about topic with a lot of our customers. So I do a lot of pre-installations and helping with setting up live maps. And a lot of training sessions that we offer. And I know Chris handles the support desk and does a lot of training sessions and installations as well. So we've gathered a plethora of questions and ideas from our customers about what needs to be done with live maps. And we brought this topic back as this is at the top of everyone's tips and questions all the time. So the authoring console. Chris, if you wouldn't mind jumping to it, let's just all get on the same page. So the authoring console is the part of live maps that the administrators use the most. In particular, it's the part that will allow you to design groups, distributed applications, and static dashboards. It's this application. So now the first thing to note is that it's a Windows-based application. So one of the most asked for questions is, where do I install this and what's the best practice for Subvision? So we advise a lot of the time not, just like Microsoft would do, to place this on a management server. Just because a management server from SCOM will be busy itself, and this is an application that requires processors, memory, and CPU. So anything it has to fight against is probably not a good benefit for it. Although it is only requiring the resources when up and running like this in the start mode. It doesn't constantly talk to SCOM. It doesn't constantly pull data on it. It only talks to the SDK at the moment it starts up. But what we advise most people is to have a authoring console located, if you want it centralized, that multiple admins can get to it on a server that has access to the management service themselves. Very handy to put all of the components together on a single server. It makes life a lot easier. So our authoring console, our web application, the mobile notification service, and potentially other services that you're running alongside a SCOM console. As the authoring console's only prerequisite is that it needs to talk to SCOM through an SDK. So you will be requiring an installation of a FAT client from SCOM. Now, I know Chris has got some experience with actually putting this on a management server, so he would definitely be able to talk about that. Before I hand it over to him, one of the more common scenarios that I do advise a lot of customers to do, if you guys don't have to be centralized for administrators, is to install this locally on your own workstations. If you have a SCOM console there, then LiveMap's authoring console can work there as well, and then it gets your local computer or laptop or workstations processes, which could be beefed up a little bit more than some of your servers. As long as it can talk to the SCOM management servers that you need to edit your live maps in, all will work just fine.
So on the topic of actually installing it on a management server, the only thing I advise people to know is that you have to realize we're spinning up a SCOM SDK, communicating into management server almost the exact same way that the SCOM console is doing. So as long as you have the resources to handle the equivalent of 2 SCOM consoles running at the same time, then you're usually pretty good. I've run into lots of people that have spun it up, had it running on a management server. They also work out of the SCOM server, or they don't install it locally. They actually just RDP into the management server and just kind of leave it there. It's fine. It's not like it's going to kill things. You just have to make sure you have the allocated resources. On that same note, we also like to have it on a management server. If you're going to do that on a management server, that's probably your least busy, the least number of agents targeting it. So that way we're not trying to interrupt any workflows or just adding to the workflows that particular management server is running on.
So, Chris, do you have any suggestions on preferably the bare minimum resources that the authoring console would require?
Well, I know that the authoring console, in the times that I've looked at it, it's usually, for one, if you ever try to install it on a server that only has one virtual processor, you'll notice that we immediately say, hey, you should have 2. So, think about the fact that, because we're also assuming that you may run the SCOM console at the same time, which is perfectly fine. So, just assume that it's going to need its own virtual CPU for whatever. And then if you spin it up, you'll notice that we'll be taking up about 600 megabytes of memory. So the SCOM console usually takes 600 to 800, depending on what it's doing.
Yeah, and that's purely the caching that we're pulling of all let's say the objects or instances out of SCOM in order to enable an administrator to edit this.
Yeah, exactly.
So one worthy note, this is really just for the administrators because of the privileges, which we'll come back and talk about shortly. But this is not something that you have to size out for all of your users. Now, on top of this, so this is talking to the SDK. That's a common theme, that you need the SCOM console in there. Potentially, something to mention is that even if you do spec this out on a beast of a device, do not expect an insane amount of speed increase from the authoring console. And this is, the second topic we wanted to talk about, which is we get a lot of questions in there, which is why is the authoring console so slow? When the authoring console saves, it has to talk and communicate to SCOM. And that's really the bottleneck that we have. So we've drawn up here actually a list of what goes on when saving anything in the authoring console.
Yeah. So anytime you do a dashboard, a list dashboard, basically we're saving those things into an MP. We're saving the view type and the data presentation, and then also targeting discoveries for a group. When you talk about creating a service, we're doing that actually 4 times. One for the service itself, the DA, and then at least for the end user application and infrastructure. Now, it could be a couple more depending on if you have sub dashboards on there, but each dashboard you have, we're doing kind of the same thing over and over again. And then, when it's doing that, obviously SCOM is creating tables, workflows, discoveries. We have our own monitors, for the groups. If any of you have looked at it, you'll notice that we do a roll up for availability, security, configuration, and performance, which you can disable if you need to, but that's the roll-ups that we handle. And then, of course, we're waiting for the calculations of the group and the health roll-ups. When SCOM is finally done with that, it finally reports to us and says, okay, I'm done. I completed the task. And that's when we make it available to continue on. We don't just do a save and, okay, let SCOM handle the rest and let you continue. We actually do wait for SCOM to report back to say, I've completed this process, which is why it does seem to take a long time.
One of the things to mention is that the actual saving process itself doesn't really change, because no matter what you've changed, we are redoing this all the time. Because technically what we're doing is writing them MPs or the groups over and over again. And we rewrite them from scratch, which is why every time you save, it's perfect save. We're not missing a rule. You haven't forgotten a reference somewhere. LiveMaps takes care of all of that. So best practice I would advise a lot of people is actually use that caching that the authoring console has to go through and generate multiple groups or multiple services for yourself, do your edits. And for those of you who don't know, in the LiveMaps authoring console, if you do an edit to a dashboard, which could be as simple as just dragging a new object on there or writing a new dynamic rule or just changing the object itself, it could be, it will be marked in the authoring console as not changed or not saved.
Yeah, the save all.
Yeah, so you'll have multiple tabs open, and what we'd recommend is then using the Save All button, as Chris has highlighted there, instead of the single save, as the Save All will save everything that you've changed in a single period of time. So, for example, Chris has dragged that one object across. You'll notice in the top part of the tab, there's a little asterisk that pops open that says that these changes have not been dedicated to SCOM. So if you were to close this down right then and go to your SCOM console, it would not adopt what you've just adjusted into it. You'd have to hit the saving process. And the saving process is literally the bottleneck we have. We are working on removing this and improving this. I think some of you have tried out our web feature, the Object Explorer dashboard. If you haven't, feel free to go into your web front end, locate that dashboard and play around with creating it. That's sort of the speed at which we're looking at doing a lot more in the future. And that gets us a workaround around the SDK, because as you can imagine, the front end does do some saving into SCOM as well, but it is a lot lighter process than this one. Back to the best practice, I would recommend the save all, so do multiple saves and write the save all in there. Now, you may come across sometimes when you've done multiple saves, press save, and then you do multiple changes, that if you press save again really rapidly after that, or potentially someone else is using the console and going in there, you might get an error message, an error 1. Now, I've seen this a few times on some slower systems as well. The error 1 pops up when we're trying to write through the SDK to save to the group or the management pack, and it's in use by SCOM. That could be for multiple reasons. That could be a calculations being applied to it. That could be, an edit is being changed in from SCOM, an object's moved or changed, something like that that you don't get to see in the authoring console. Don't panic, don't freak out. Just clear out the error, because that's the SCOM error that we're getting back. Wait a couple seconds and press save again, and you'll actually see that it gets to rewrite it at that stage, because SCOM moves on and is doing something else in there. So that is a huge benefit, that we're taking over a lot of the processes, that you would manually have to do. So even during that saving process, we've had a couple of customers come to us and said, well, I can build a DA, I can build those groups, I can group all the components together. But using LiveMaps, it's much faster than me having to do that manually. That's because we rewrite all of that correctly at the saving process. So no matter what you're designing, we will make sure that it gets stored and written the right way in the MPs.
Yeah. And then another error that you may run across is an initialization error. This is an error that we've noticed here, especially those people that have been moving to 2016. The 2016 SCOM console has an issue that Microsoft has sort of fixed. When you have the console, the operations manager console and the service manager console on the same workstation. We're working on that issue. Microsoft has put in their fix for the issue, and it has helped some situations, but not all. We still, unfortunately, have the issue. So if you run into a case where you have an application initialization error when you're starting the authoring console, just be aware that if you have the service manager console loaded on that workstation, we're currently not going to be able to work. I just figured I'd mention that during this process until obviously it's fixed. and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, and if you are running into it, Chris, it's just a short email or a telephone call away, or a Skype. If you've got it, feel free to let us know, and we will help you out with that. The authoring console does use a lot of locks in there, so it's systems in process that we need to use, and we've noticed that those two consoles, are not best friends with each other, and Microsoft is aware of this.
Yeah.
Another question we get quite a lot around the authoring console, which could probably be a session unto its own, so we're going to keep it a bit light, is the security levels. In particular with the authoring console, we get a lot of questions from users about, can I get a non-admin to access this part to create his services? Unfortunately not. Literally the way that the authoring console works, when you load it up and you target it to your management server, which, by the way, is best. There's a good tip for you, is potentially to always target the quietest management server. If you are suffering from a bit of a speed write, go for your quietest management server. If you don't know which one that is within the within the SCOM console, head to your administration part and look up your management servers and see which one has the lowest number at that stage. That's not a 100% guarantee, because if you have a Veeam collector on one of the management servers, it's going to be busy, even if it's not doing any other work. But always pick the quietest one. You can switch the connections as well between management servers. So if you're not happy with the saving process on one of them, go to another management server during your session, see if that improves, or run another Live Maps authoring console up. You can run multiple ones at the same time. I think some of the people that I've helped out recently have seen that I do that regularly, because I'm not a very patient man, and I just know that SCOM doesn't run as fast as I do. But this is an admin level. So when you do load in, we actually go into SCOM and we pull a full cache of everything. So you need admin rights to be able to access all of the classes in there. It would be a really weird and disjointed experience if we were to give users the ability to see the classes underneath the components, infrastructure, for example, and then go to Windows Server, and they'd expect to find their server, but because someone hasn't allocated a user role or a particular group to that user role, when he logs in, he doesn't see his one specific server, which then makes his experience really horrible. Also, when we save, going back to that slide that Chris showed, we do a lot of stuff that even elevated administrator rights, or the role that you can elevate someone within SCOM would not have privileges to do within SCOM, like create an SLO or create monitors or rules, which we're doing in the background, which you can see on any of the groups that we do. We do our role, health roll-up states and all that. That wouldn't be allowed by an average admin user, for example. So we're not planning on changing this. This is, the way that it works. It's the way that we make sure that the dashboards you create are 100% accurate and do exactly what they're expected to do. So they do require administrative privileges. What we're looking at in a future version is being able to switch over in the front end between a standard user and an administrator role, which today is possible, but you have to do that at login process. But we're potentially going to look at that as a non-login process, that an admin can see the diagram or dashboard that he's created and switch over to admin role and actually edit it right there. Don't hold your breath too long. It is on its way. For now, the authoring console does require full administrative privileges within SCOM.
So another topic happens to be licensing. I don't know, realize a lot of these topics, some of you guys may already know. We are trying to kind of cover a broad base based on different things, questions that we get. You can open up the License Manager a couple ways. You can go to Help. If I go to Help and then License Manager, there's another one down here where I can open up the License Manager directly from here to give you your licenses. One thing I want to talk about, especially with those that are on subscriptions. For a long time, we only sold perpetual, and then we went to kind of this, you can have a subscription or perpetual now. For those people that have subscription or need a new license key, we only allow one base license. So if you do get to a point where you've re-upped, you've got a new license key come in, it's valid for the next year, next 2 years, whatever, you have to actually remove the old license that's about to expire before installing the new one. So we only allow one base license. That's a common question that I get in support, especially those that are running out of their subscriptions. Don't worry. you're not losing any of your data. The data is technically stored in SCOM. All this is updating an object in SCOM. Same thing's true whenever you uninstall your authoring console. The data is still there in SCOM. So if you uninstall, need to reinstall at another location. So if you did want to move it off a management server, put it on its own server or something like that, you don't lose any data. The data is all in SCOM.
But one word of warning then is that having multiple licenses in there, as there are some customers who have potentially an older styled license or an additional ad license on top of there, it's always good to clear out the older licenses and stay with your base license, because the objects still exist in SCOM. And potentially we have seen one or two at the support desk where they've inserted a new license and it hasn't cleared the SCOM. SCOM looks at the old object still and sees that it doesn't work and doesn't get a health state roll up or anything like that. Always head to your licensing manager and do a good clean out here.
Yeah. If you see any that are actually red, that have expired, or that you're on version 8 and you have an old version 7 license, go ahead and remove those. It's just best practice just to keep a set license. It's not reading. If you got version 8 on there and you got old version 7 licenses included, we're not reading those. Except for I have had a few cases where the older web console, I haven't heard this in a long time, but it does happen every now and then, where the older web console, the old Silverlight one, would accidentally read the older license. And so all of a sudden it'd say that you're not licensed because it was reading the version 7 license, and the way to clear that up was just simply to remove the old license. So I do recommend keeping the licenses clean, because it's always possible that you have multiple licenses.
Yeah, so it might be worthwhile also mentioning that Sufficient only really issues a new license at a major upgrade. So if when we go version 8.9, which is coming very shortly, you won't need a new license for it to work if you're on version 8. Obviously, if you're on an older version of 8, so 8.1, 8.2, might be a good idea to get a hold of us, connect with us so that we can help you make sure that you've got the latest features, because an 8.1 license will still work with the 8.8 console. You won't have any problems with it, but we would probably want to do a best practice check with you to make sure that there are no other older versions of consoles sitting in your environment. Just a heads up, because you can have multiple consoles of Live Maps authoring console. If you have an 8.1 console talking to SCOM, it will read the license, it will work just fine. But if someone else in the environment has an 8.8 console and suddenly does something like build a service in there, the 8.1 user could see the service but might not be able to edit it correctly because he's missing some of the features in 8.8.
That's especially true when you jump from, we added a view type in 8.5. So if you have some 8.1, 2, 3, 4s out there that still exist, and you've already upgraded your console to like 8.8, and so that means the SCOM server is upgraded to 8.8 already. If they try to edit the service, chances are they're going to get an error. Because it doesn't understand the view type, and the view type is our health service index. So I know for a fact that barrier is there. Now, sometimes you can get away with it. So like if you have an 8.7 authoring console and you've already upgraded 8.8, probably not going to affect it that much. But as we add things to the different releases, there's always a chance that it doesn't understand a view type or something along those lines. So we always keep track of the authoring consoles you've installed, where you've installed them. We've never licensed on authoring consoles, so you can obviously have multiple ones out there. It's just be wary that if something doesn't work right, first thing you need to do is verify the version number of the authoring console to make sure you're on the version that you have installed in SCOM.
And the second thing is drop Chris an email.
Yeah,
it's a common theme here for me. So one thing to mention on this is some of the benefits of using an authoring console approach like we do have is that we don't have a database sitting outside. We don't have a storage system sitting outside. It's all SCOM itself, which means if you uninstall the authoring console and migrate it somewhere else, because a lot of you are probably thinking, wow, I put it on the management server. Maybe that's not a good idea. And you want to migrate it to your own local server, you will not lose any of your dashboards, any of your groups, anything that you've created. They all live and breathe within SCOM. And as long as the license key works there, you don't actually have to have an authoring console. Just when you do come to upgrade, it is the only way to change the licenses out for that. While we're here, it might be good just to talk through some of the wizards that you have. This will be the last topic that we touch now, and then I'll open up the floor for questions. Obviously, you guys have loads of questions, so we'll try and keep it open as long as we can answer them.
Well, we're hoping you guys have loads of questions.
Yeah. I see a couple popping in right now. I think lots of people want to know what's coming. Right now, what you're seeing within the Live Maps authoring console at the moment is roughly separated into two types of wizards. You have a service-based wizard on the left-hand side with Discover Service, Create Service, and Import Distribute Application. Now, those are really good, heavy working wizards that give you an immediate large set of dashboards instantly out of the box, in particular the service map ones. So Discover Service, Chris, if you could just click in there, that's where we're expanding, I think, regularly, if not daily, lots of the lists of services we have in here.
Yeah.
So you can see, I think at the moment we're up to about 26 of these. We're just about to have another release where we're adding in NICE's Office 365 management pack. We have another webinar for that. If you guys haven't checked it out, I'd recommend looking at it. If you guys are migrating your Exchange service onto Office 365, it's a really good start, and we're working with them to get some other services coming out.
And then the Veeam backup and replication.
Yep, so an extension on the Veeam management pack that we did. So we had a lot of requests around that. So that's coming. We've got some more in the work. So for our educational customers, we're looking at things like Blackboard. And for our medical customers, we're looking at things like Cloverfield and Epic, which probably won't say a lot to a lot of application owners here, but might be interesting. Some out-of-the-box specialized services that we're doing. If you have any requests of stuff that you're struggling with in your service mapping stuff, drop us a line. We're definitely willing to talk to you guys. You've got the two most, I think, efficient Live Maps users in the world in the room right now. Besides the founders, probably, of the company. We've been at this for, I think, a combined experience of close to 15 years. So these services will deploy instantly out of there. You've got the Create Service Wizard, which right now is an incredible good way to build your own services in there. If Chris could cancel out on that. The service ones will build on the all service dashboard, the wizards on there. They're really there to take away a lot of the workloads you'll be doing in SCOM, like building the groups. Was it the health roll-up rules and monitors for that? So you could even use those wizards blankly. The Create Service I commonly as best practice, which we'll do another topic on. I know we're planning that one for about March. But I've just released a blog article, which if you guys would like to get access to, drop me an email, which shows you how to use the Create service to create not only a service map, but also a technical dashboard rapidly, where you go through the Create service blankly, add a computer group, add all the computers in there, write some dynamic rules in the service map, and you have a fully automated service map and technical dashboard attached to it, which is I can guarantee most of you guys, if you're struggling with it, would mean that you'd have a service for yourself out of the box, ready to go in a matter of minutes, that you could start talking to the application owners about. On the right-hand side, we have a Create Overview dashboard, Create List, and Create Diagram. Now, if you've not read Chris's KB articles on what type of views are possible within Live Maps, I would highly recommend. It's a great read. It explains a little bit more about that. Essentially, we break down into three types of dashboards: a list, a diagram, or an interactive map with big maps in the background.
Yeah, the one thing that most people don't realize, the Create Overview dashboard and the Create Diagram are basically the same thing. You're creating a diagram in either. The Create Overview dashboard assumes that you already have certain dashboards created and you want to create something like a big knock screen. It's going to put each one into a tile. The wizard itself has a maximum of 12 dashboards, sub-dashboards that you can link into that one. But that's just the wizard. More can be added later on. I think most of the people on here probably already know what diagrams and lists are, so I don't necessarily need to beat that dead horse. But I do want to cover the import groups real quick. So if you already have a group created in SCOM, the nice thing about here is that you can basically take that group and copy it into a diagram or a list. It's going to take the membership rules for that group and copy it. Now, obviously, it's going to make a second group in your SCOM environment named exactly the same thing. You can rename it after the fact. But if you have a group that's already based off membership rules or has explicit members, it's just going to copy all of that over and make a duplicate of it.
Which you can then edit in live maps, so you can actually go in and edit the dynamic rules, which is a great twist. But if we talk about the benefits of doing it through live maps, so this really does, encourage you guys potentially to do this more often, is that you will automatically have a health calculation on that group. So you don't have to manually go and create it in the group.
Yeah.
Obviously, best practice at that stage is potentially to remove the SCOM group that you're doing, as the live maps group will automatically function the exact same. And it can still be used just like you're using your SCOM group. So if you've got any overrides or anything attached to it, you can target it as well. One of the hidden gems, which I'm starting to show a lot of other customers, is we do it for the services groups, but we don't do it for the import groups one. By default, it's set out, but we do have an override in the overrides that if you go in there, you can switch on alerting for that group. So for your technical teams, if you've got a group, let's say, of all your SQL servers, and your SQL Server guy wants to know when a SQL Server goes down, poor fool, he probably doesn't realize how many alerts he's going to get. Lump them into a group, live maps group, go into the Health Explorer, switch on the generate alert, and set that as a subscription for him. That means you'll get an alert every time the group changes health state, not every time every single SQL Server in that group changes health state, which could make his email box thank you a lot more.
Yep.
That's automatic with it.
The import sites and subnets, it basically makes, if you're going to have if you're doing more of an infrastructure kind of location, geographical location type of dashboards, it makes it, especially combining it with the interactive maps. Some people we find just want to grab the sites that they've already set up in AD. You can do it manually. So if you want to set a subnet, then basically it does a list. It creates a list for each site. So it can generate 60, 70 dashboards in an instant. I know I've done it. And it actually does it faster than trying to create the list manually, obviously. But it will generate a regular expression membership rule for like all the computers with a certain subnet. It's way better than me trying to figure out the regular expression on my own because I'm just not a pro at that.
Yeah, I think every time someone asks me how good are your regular expressions, I say, oh, we got a sites and subnet widget for that one. So pretty much I'm good with computer names and groupings and potential references. I'd recommend going into this one. You can select different classes as well now. So we added that feature a couple of editions back. So it's not just computers or printers or stuff you normally have at the location. It could also be anything else that has a site or subnet attached to it. Network devices is a popular one.
Exactly. So that's kind of the wizards. There's a few things that I like to cover. I find just going through support, some kind of things that have shown up, especially recently with 2016, people migrating to 2016. I think most people are used to looking at their dashboards, or let me clear this out so it I don't have to think about it anymore, or looking at their services. Some people go through and look at the actual folder structure in SCOM, not everybody. But one nice thing in here is with this ability, you can obviously see where your dashboards are. If you go to a folder and it's blank, that means we don't have a live maps dashboard in that particular folder. But from here, you have the option to actually add a new folder. And when you add a new folder, it's going to ask you what MP you want to save it in. Where that comes to play is you can turn around and actually create a brand new MP real quick. And when you're done with that particular process, you then have the option, a new option, and I'm going to cancel out of that because I actually have my testing dashboards one down here. If I grab any one of these, I have the option to actually copy that dashboard and move it into a different folder. So now I can turn around and paste it in here. Now, where this comes to play is especially those people migrating from 2012 to 2016. If they have a whole bunch of dashboards, all of those dashboards, especially in the live maps folder, are generally going to be saved in the Civision authoring MP. They may not want to bring all of them over. They only want to bring certain ones. So if you make a new dashboard, save it to an MP, or create a new MP, paste the dashboards that you do want to bring over, then all you have to do is export that MP from the SCOM console and then import it into the new 2016 management group. It does give you a way to kind of migrate information from one side to the other without having to do all of them. So
I think just to add to that, a lot of people don't realize it, but it seems very simple. Copy paste.
Yeah.
You cannot do this in the SCOM console.
Exactly.
You'd have to generate a new management pack and rebuild the objects in there. Essentially, that's what Live Maps Authoring Console is doing for you. When you paste, it will go and write that for you.
Yeah.
So it does. People say it's slow, but we're doing a lot of processes that you'd have to manually do yourself on top of that. Here's just a recap of what we did talk about at this stage. So the how, where's, the whys, the benefits, some.
And then we should add a plus at the end.
Yes, and then a few more questions. So we've got a few ideas for the next session. We have this one planned already. So in mid-February, you'll be getting another emailing coming out, and we'd really appreciate you guys to come back and talk to us again. Automating your live map services will be the topic. Some people have started talking about it here, so that could be interesting.
It's going to be very membership rule intensive, and a lot of people, at least from the support side, I get questions about membership rules. And I know I've asked that question in webinars before. Would you like to see something on membership rules? And I've always got a big response to yes. So we'll try to give you a basic overview of, hey, this is how you can make it extremely dynamic, and try to explain some of the membership rules to you so you can kind of get an idea of what they all do and how you can leverage it. Because the membership rules very, very powerful.
Yes, yeah, I think that's if you guys don't want to do a lot of work, but don't tell the bosses that, get to live and breathe membership rules. I think even someone's got a request that we even make more membership rules in there. And I think that's it. We're covered for now. Thank you very much for attending. Sorry we went a bit over time. I'm glad that everyone's up for it. Hopefully you enjoyed it, the session with this one. We do look forward to talking to you again, and we will see you again in February.